Astral projection versus lucid dreaming. How are they different? Let's examine these in detail. Essentially, lucid dreams are when you are awake inside a dream and consciously aware you are dreaming. You take notice of your surroundings almost as if you're awake in the physical world, going on about your day, only you're dreaming you're doing it. Astral projection happens when you are awake and consciously aware, but you're not dreaming at all. In fact, there's almost no activity going on in the mind whatsoever. Your brain, your mind, they're very, very still. Although the brain stem, our third brain, which actuates the autonomic nervous system, is still doing its thing. So we're not dead, but we're in a very, very different state of being than we would be if the mind was making images and environments from our memory we can form dreams with. So this particular state itself lends us to being able to focus and concentrate on everything that is not going on in the mind and in the brain. There's no dream images, there's no sensory input to interpret because of what we call the trance state or the cataleptic state. The early pioneers of this phenomena, Sylvan Muldoon and Heward Carrington, they use this word to describe what we go through and what the body does when we fall into the state needed for astral projection. So these two things, these phenomena of lucid dreaming and astral projection, they've been confused because so many people struggle with the success of both these. But when you actually consciously 100% you separate into what we call the astral plane, you're in this Yitzharitic world. You are more awake and aware than you ever have been probably in your entire life in our corporeal world, or what we call the physical dimension. Most people who practice astral projection never quite reach an adept stage where the totality of awareness is focused entirely away from anything physical and located completely in the astral world itself. Most of us start to dream during our astral experience because the mind doesn't like to be still. And then the lines blur between these two phenomena and we fall back into dreaming. So your awareness needs to be focused on what the mind is not doing. This is pretty hard to grasp for most people. The consciousness has to be stronger than our mechanical brain or you will phase into dreams. So between the two phenomena of astral projection and lucid dreaming, this confusion persists. These definitions blur. However, any definitions themselves are not important for anything other than the sake of our conversation. And conversation itself is not any valid substitute for practical experience either. We can talk about this forever. You can read 100 articles on a subject, yet actually be nowhere with experience. So filling your head with this intellectual information might help you understand something, but it is not ultimately going to grant you an experience on its own. With all matters occult, you have to do this yourself. That's how this works. So what we'll focus on is simply to address an issue first here of why people mistake the two separate phenomena of astral projection and lucid dreams as part of the same definition. While we cannot say anyone else's experience itself is wrong, what we can say is that the interpretation of our experience isn't always accurate to reality. This kind of misinterpretation of our experience has to do with the strength of conscious focus and what we come to realize and are aware of. So there's this main issue, and it is that people are confusing two separate but related phenomena of actually being awake and self-aware in what we call the astral dimension and the phenomena of simply waking up in a dream and realizing you're doing it. And trust me, the mind, the human brain, our brains are incredibly apt at being able to take anything it finds and make some sort of sense out of what it doesn't understand. So, despite popular ideas and beliefs, the truth itself is that conscious astral travel and lucid dreaming are two separate things, and what separates them is the degree and percentage of focus we are able to maintain our conscious energy upon and where that point of focus happens to be. Success is then achieved by being able to maintain a focus on one or the other, one being the objective astral plane outside of us, or the other being a subjective lucid dream inside of us, of our physical brain. So they are two separate locales of focus. You can get a better background on this principle. It's suggested you read into Robert Monroe and Frank Keppel's works. Now, based on what my own experiences have been, I have to agree a lot with what Robert Monroe said when he states in his work that consciousness does not separate, it phases like electrical voltage. If we're trying to explore the objective astral plane, we were not quite phased into it completely, then the part of us that isn't phased in it can be stuck in a dream or hallucination of what's going on in the right brain during the stages of trance or dream sleep, and we confuse these things which get projected onto the experience of what is really there that is outside of our own imagination. So this means that if we are totally wrapped up in a daydream or our hypnagogic dream images, we are phased into a dream. Dreams are the right brain trying to make sense out of what's stored in its memory cortex, and when we dream, most of our conscious energy is placed in the location of what the brain is doing. It's important to understand that the consciousness does not come from our brain. It's not a result of us having a brain. What our brain is, that something that consciousness needs to use as a tool to get around in the world we live in. And our consciousness can really only work as well as the brain is put together. The brain's just a tool that makes sense out of the impressions we receive from our sensory organs. And if our senses aren't clear, then we don't realize a lot of things. It's within our experiences we receive impressions about a thing. Because we aren't always clear-minded, because many things escape our notice, thus we do not understand the nature of many things. So dreams take place in the mind, yet when we wake up and we're not dreaming anymore, we're focused on our presence of awareness in the material physical world around us. A little more in depth about exploring the astral. To explore the astral dimension, a dimension separate from our own normal physical world, but also one which has its own presence and geometry as real as our own physical world, to explore that place, we must put all our awareness and presence within that dimension. We must make this other world that exists separate from our own at the time a focal point of notice or phase angle for our conscious energy. If we don't accomplish the awareness of our presence of being in its entirety, then these parts that are not there usually find themselves attached to our dreams, and they attach to our ideas, our mental constructs, which then mix and superimpose themselves onto the other point of focus. This means that our dreams and ideas in them get mixed with any actual objective experience, and we don't have the strength of consciousness usually to differentiate between the two. They will seem as if they're all part of one same experience. So let's explore what I'm talking about a little further. What's conjured in the mind and then explored or scryed consciously, it's not at all the same thing as being awake and cognitive in another body, in another world or dimension of existence. Certainly, elements of those dimensions closest to where we aim our conscious focus can bleed themselves into or onto the screen of our minds. Elements of our own imagination and ideas can find their way into the mix and throw our interpretation off. It's therefore imperative to say that discipline, and discipline itself is the key factor in determining whether we are focused in one place or if we're in multiple places at the same time, sometimes all over the place if we're psychologically imbalanced or especially emotionally unstable. We have our senses through which we receive impressions. When we experience something, we receive impressions about that circumstance through our senses. We then interpret our impressions accordingly. When it's the circumstance that someone's consciousness is not focused on not just one thing, but on another as well, then they are going to receive impressions about both things. When impressions of both points of conscious focus mix, it's the usual fallacy of human psychology to then interpret them as being from the same one place or one point of focus without realizing the greater nature of what just happened. This is the source of all kinds of ridiculous superstition and belief that's shown itself through humanity's history. This is the main reason of misinterpreted impressions and far-off assumptions, usually things regarding religious symbols that haven't been deciphered and the end-time sort of subjects. What we dream about and what we are not dreaming about, should they reach our awareness at the same time, they must not be mistaken for the same thing. The true astral. It's an amazing experience now to actually be clear and totally present in the astral world itself. Words fail to describe having this focus of most your entire consciousness in one place. It's not easy to phase completely into, but it's a well worth it goal for sure. And I don't wish for people to get stuck mistakenly doing the wrong practice when they think they're doing the right one. Lucid dreams are not the same thing as astral projection because they are two separate locale of focus. What they have in common, though, is that consciousness can phase into either or, even both, but their respective impressions are coming from two different places. One place is a separate dimension, the astral, and the other is the dimension of the mind dreaming in symbols. I myself I've had many flying dreams. I woke up in tons of them. I have them a lot actually, but I don't consider them successful astral traveling sessions because I know compared to having the real experience, these lucid dreams and astral travel are two separate things. Most people I have seen get tricked by having dreams about doing it. You know, they dream they're having out of body experiences. They dream of dying or leaving their bodies, but that is not the same thing as actually having the real experience itself. I don't wish to discourage anyone, and certainly waking up in dreams is a good start towards consciousness exploration. However, one of the most important things when dealing with astral projection is making sure you understand what it is exactly and if you are even doing it or not, because people will achieve lucid dreams their whole life mistaking them for what they thought was astral projection, yet never really comprehend the reality surrounding the nature of these two phenomena or the nature of their own consciousness. It'd be like they're doing the wrong thing right. So some tips real quick. Um, with all this information in mind, the best thing to do now with this information is to go find a technique that works best for you, um, and anything that helps strengthen your ability to be present and focus on all your conscious energy on one spot. Focus on one place. Then when you attempt to do astral projection, do not let impressions of dreams creep into your awareness. You have to stay focused on things that aren't dreams until the right moment when you can separate from the physical and phase your point of conscious focus onto the astral dimension, something outside yourself. Um, it's never so much the technique itself you choose to use that matters, but it's that you learn, you understand what you're doing and why you're doing it. Then you'll find what works best for yourself. Don't jump around from technique to technique until you've really understood one and found out why it does or does not work for you. And don't let anyone try and sell you anything or scare you away or into anything either. I strongly suggest reading the fundamentals of this practice. Um, my first exposition into it came from reading the experiments of Sylvan Muldoon and Howard Carrington. Find their stuff and read it all. From there, you can move to Robert Monroe's work from there, and there's many more authors by now, but as this has caught on in the recent past. But I'm giving you reading suggestions based on my own experience, and I know that what the truth is, and I know what's nonsense. I've read a lot of stuff out there that's just a lot of new age nonsense. So you really have to separate yourself from the mumbo jumbo and then align yourself with the more science angle of the whole